Oops, a daisy, what's the matter? Right. Okay, got me 2 bags. Alright guys. My daughter trying to pull out, look at her. On the grass. Ah! Look at her driving, look at it. What about it? He's like, my daughter crashes into her car. You know, all of my kids are just going to write off all their cars. They're just so, I don't know. She's 19, Tyler is, so I don't know what to say. I remember I passed my driving test when I was 17. I'll tell you the story. So welcome to Elvis Presley Long Lost Footage. I'm not sure if you're aware, guys, but this channel also has some footage of me restoring and repairing classic vehicles. On this one, I think it's the Volkswagen Beetle. It's a 1969 Beetle that I converted into a black Herbie. So you know Herbie, obviously the movie's Herbie, which we all love. You know, I watched the recent Herbie, and it was pretty good. Pretty good. It was, oh, who is it? Is it Matt Dillon? I mean, it's still a bit old, you know, it's probably 10 years old. Could be a little bit more than that. But I actually quite liked it. I watched it with Tino and Yasmin. Have you ever seen it, guys? The new Herbie? Well, it's not new, but you know. But obviously, we all fell in love with the original Herbies. I watched many of them through the 70s and when they were rerun in the 80s. As you know, I restore Volkswagen air-cooled vehicles. So that could be a T25, it could be a T2 or a T1. So a bay window or a split screen. And the other ones, they call them the brick. The T25, known as the brick. You know, they're camper vans. They got a little cooker in them, a little bed and sofa. I tell you what, nothing gives me a better feeling, camping-wise, than being in a vintage classic car from the 60s, 70s or 80s, actually even the 50s. I love working on them when I'm in the mood. The problem with working on classic vehicles is that they can be a bloody nightmare. You sort of look at them and you sort of think, you know, obviously they're rusty and everything goes wrong on them. The engine, the brakes, the suspension, the gearbox, the electrics. Just everything goes wrong on classic cars. If you buy a classic car, I don't care what it is, at some point, everything will go wrong, even if it's been restored. Everything needs readjusting, servicing. So I find I've had quite a few. I've been restoring cars since I was 16 years old. My first car I restored, I was 16. I worked in a garage as a trainee mechanic with a guy called Rod Cope. I actually think I was 15 when I started there, because I left school at 15, yeah? One of my first jobs, I had a few, was in that garage as a trainee, but I worked before then. I had a job when I was 11. I was doing washing up in a little cafe just up the road from my father's cafe. So my father refused to pay me. So the guy in the cafe a couple of doors up from our cafe is on a road called Richmond Street. The cafe was called the Danesbury, and the cafe had been there through the 1950s. You know, the sort of rock and roll cafes where you had pinball and jukeboxes, and the kids would hang out and get burgers and Coke, which was very cool in the 50s. You know, the cafe bar culture. Hi, Karen. Just having a chat. So I have decided I'm going to start doing some lives on Elvis Presley Long Lost Footage and on Elvis Presley Fan on Keto. I'm going to do more lives on those two and then do my main videos on defending Elvis. So you got the cafe culture. Do any of you remember the cafe culture? Do any of you remember that? It's like when all the cafes were the cool places. I know it was very much a 50s and 60s, early 70s thing, yeah? So my generation just missed it a little bit. So obviously my father had a cafe that he ran in London, near New Cross in London. You know, a pinball, eggs and bacon, burgers and hot dogs, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever it was. Weston, my hometown, Weston-super-Mare, had a massive cafe culture. The Beatles actually performed and visited Weston a few times. They performed a couple of times, I think. Once, I think, was in the cinema, the Odeon, and the other time, I think, was the Winter Gardens. But you've got pictures of the Beatles walking down the promenade along the beach in Weston-super-Mare, near Bristol. They're on the rocks. They're sat on the top of a roof building. I think that building is still here. Pepsi in a glass bottle. Yeah, you got it. I remember when we were kids, Karen, me and my twin brother, for money, because we had no money, but because we lived across the road from the beach, we would spend our summer days on the beach, and we would collect these glass bottles up in crates and give them to the shop, you know, the shop on the beach, which was like a big caravan, and he would give us like a penny per bottle or 2p per bottle, and that would be how we would get our chocolate and ice cream. That's it, you got it, Karen. That would be how me and my brother would spend our days doing that. So we always had enough money to buy an ice cream or a chocolate bar, whatever, some sweets, sometimes even a drink. My dad used to give me 10p and say, make sure that lasts all day. And I used to think, how does 10p last all day, even in 1972? So, yeah, the weather isn't too bad. It's like, it could be worse, couldn't it? It looks like it's going to rain. So anyway, I was saying about the cafe culture. My dad was part of that. My dad came over from Cyprus. He was from Limassol and Paphos. So he was born in Paphos, but then was adopted and moved to Limassol. But even though he was adopted, he was still very close to his real family, his true family. So he wasn't adopted away from his family. It's hard to explain. So in the 60s, no, before that, sorry, in the 40s, my dad was adopted. Just a little small boy. I think he was 3 or 4. But in those days, you didn't adopt a child because you didn't love them or didn't want them. You adopted them because you couldn't afford to bring them up. So you sort of adopted them and shared parenting. So even though my dad was adopted from Paphos to Limassol, he still saw his brothers and sisters from his original family, because my dad had 4 brothers, 3 sisters. So so when we visited Cyprus, my dad would visit both families. So he would visit his original family and his new family. Now his new family just had 1 brother, a guy called George. So I always remember my dad saying to me that when he missed, he wasn't adopted away from the family. He just lived in a different home. Someone else was responsible for his education and feeding him, you know, his home, all that kind of stuff. But he was so close to his original family, and he was so close to his mum and dad, that it was like he wasn't adopted but lived in a different place. My dad did tell me that initially the transition was tough. You know, he cried himself to sleep at first, but he eventually got used to it. Now, where he was adopted from was a very poor area called Stima. It's called Marathunda, which is in an area called Stima near Paphos. So the types of buildings and roads were very rural. So my dad was in a very rural area. So when he got moved to Limassol, some of you may have been to Cyprus, it was hard for him at first. So when he moved to Limassol, he lived in the city centre of Limassol. So I remember my dad saying to me that he was gutted that he didn't see his brothers and sisters as much, but he loved the fact that he'd moved to the city. He felt important. He felt that the people in Marathunda, where he grew up, were more like farmers, where in Limassol, his new home, new parents, he felt like living in London, so it was like being in the big city. So he did adjust, he did get used to it, and he grew to love living in Limassol. In fact, my dad's extended family are mainly in Limassol. So when we visit Cyprus, I haven't been for a long time. I used to go quite regularly, but I don't go now. I always visit Limassol, and then we have a little quick visit to Paphos. We still do have a home in Paphos, we do. It's a rural home, so it's very, it's like a 1920s home, It's like very, very rural, but also very beautiful. We also have a small home in Limassol, which is rented. It's a small 3-bedroom. So I just don't get back there like I used to. I did when I was growing up, and in my 20s, even my 30s, I went quite a lot. But in my 40s, I just haven't bothered. Now I'm 58, I haven't been for a long time. But I'm still in touch with my relatives. Every Christmas. Yeah, every Christmas, it's like you wish each other happy Christmas and all that kind of stuff. And I have a love for my family in Cyprus, I do. I always have done, and my cousins are very important to me. Even though they've got a different name. There we are, there's an Elvis pun for you. I love my cousins, I'm really close to my cousins, but their last name is not Macreadys. They have a different name, you get it? Their name is irrelevant, they're still my cousins. Anyway, so the cafe culture. I worked in a little cafe. I used to stand on a beer crate, do the washing up, and the guy used to pay me £1 an hour. This really old man, he must have been in his 80s, was running this cafe, and he'd been running this cafe since the 1940s. He could barely walk. And I always remember he would let me work 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. He would give me £3 a day. And I always used to look forward because he used to cook me a braised steak. Have any of you ever had a braised steak? I loved his braised steak. Proper Greek traditional style cooking. They were a proper Greek Cypriot couple. His wife was even older than him, and she was disabled but she wasn't disabled through being disabled. She was disabled through having very severe arthritis. Yeah, she could hardly talk. Her hands and arms were all twisted where she had such bad arthritis. But she was lovely to talk to. She would talk to me. They would both give me advice. So this little 11-year-old boy, whatever I was, and they would speak to me. Buy a property, freehold. You must buy a property. Get a good job. And I was a bit of a troublemaker there. I used to go out nicking sweets and stuff. So they would say to me, "Oh, why'd you nick sweets for? You'll get in trouble with the police." Ooh. Come on then. Come on. Come on. All right, just get past that. So anyway, I just remember that old couple in the Danesbury restaurant. I wonder if you look it up and Google it on the archives of ChatGPT, if they'd find it. They probably would. But I also know that I've had discussions with people about the cafe culture in Weston-super-Mare, my hometown. And it was a big thing. There was about 10 different cafes all around Weston that were well into the rock and roll, the sort of James Dean, Marlon Brando, the Beatles, Elvis, all that stuff. Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., all that. So all these cafes were thriving with teenagers. And my dad would chat to me about it. How all these cafes in Weston, and my dad helped dig out a cellar cafe that they called, that they imitated the cavern, you know, like the Beatles, you've got the cavern. Well, my dad and all the Greek Cypriot guys, you know, they were in their early 20s when they first moved to Weston-super-Mare from Cyprus, from London. They all dug out this big cellar bar and they created a copy of the cavern. So that became the late opening disco of the 1960s in Weston-super-Mare. The first disco Weston had. I mean, Weston went on to have many discos, yeah? Like when I was growing up through the 70s, there was a lot of Saturday Night Fever style discos in my town. I remember a few. There was one called Bieber's. There was one called Snoopy's. Later on, there was one called, what was it called? Mr. B's. We had one called Susie's. So, you know, through that period, yeah, I loved it. Through the period of the 70s disco era, you know, the John Travolta Saturday Night Fever era, I lived opposite 3 discos. So you got to imagine my life, yeah? My dad had this little cafe that didn't make any money. So what my dad decided was that he would open late at night and feed the people coming out of the discos. So my dad opened a fish and chip shop, you know, pie and chips, sausage and chips, chicken and chips, all the traditional fish and chip food, fish and chips obviously. So my dad opened one of the first fish and chip shops in front of the nightclubs. So when the people came out of these discos, they weren't called nightclubs then, they were called discos. They would all come out and my dad would serve them, and this is what gave my dad money. He gambled it all away, to be honest with you. My dad had a serious gambling habit. Caused a lot of problems, a lot of stress. Yeah, there we are, you know Karen, yeah? And so my memory as a little kid upstairs above my dad's cafe on Richmond Street in the 1970s with my twin brother, and my sisters had the bedroom next door to us. So my 2 sisters, Vivian and Dora, who were only 1 and 2 years older than us. My memories are of looking out the window, watching all these people coming out of the discos, dressed up like John Travolta. You know, the girls would dress the way they dressed in the 70s. And watching all the cars driving up and down. I remember a Trans Am driving up and down. One of the Greek guys had one, but he lives in Australia now. But my point is, so I had strong, I have strong memories of the 70s, how it felt, because even though I was just a little kid, I could look out the window and watch all these youngsters, teenagers, people in their early 20s, going out, getting drunk, chatting each other up. A lot of the men had long hair then because they were into the rock. They were, bikers. Next door to me, so we have 2 nightclubs and 12 pubs. So next door to my dad's cafe, which became a chip shop, was a biker's bar called the Phoenix. And my dad became friends with the owner of the biker's bar. His name was Dougie. So I got to know all the bikers. So all the bikers would come in with their denim and their leathers, long hair, leather trousers. They would all park their motorbikes outside my dad's chip shop. They'd all come in and buy a kebab. Or they'd come in and buy a fish and chip. So in the 70s, they were buying... All right, you had chippies, did you, Karen? So oh no, you had chippies in your town, I get it. So in the 70s, there was no kebabs. It was more normal fish and traditional menu. But as we got into the mid to late 80s, we started having kebabs then. but my dad would make kebabs. So I got to know all these bikers. I wasn't into the biker music, and these bikers were a bit scary, I always found. But I tended to prefer the people that were dressed up like John Travolta, you know, the more Elvis-y looking people. So the bikers weren't really my scene, but I still found it interesting. I used to serve these bikers. I would serve them like fish and chips and stuff. And because I was just a little kid, they'd have a bit of a joke with me. I was like 11, 12, 13, that sort of age. They noticed that me and my brother were twins. So, interesting times, guys. It was just very special times. It's funny because it's so bittersweet, because I had lovely memories of growing up in the 70s. But then things were, you know, parents were different, weren't they? The way that they, the strictness that was used by parents with kids, with husbands and wives, even at school, the way, how strict teachers were. It was just different times. It wouldn't be acceptable now, would it? If you hit your kid now, or if a teacher hit you now, it'd get in trouble. But back then, it was normal. It was actually, I would say, encouraged. I remember, well, not because I was quite naughty at school, I remember that the headmaster and the other teachers, the head teachers, telling my dad, you know, you need to punish your kids more because he's too naughty. Little did they know that he did punish me. So just a very different time. Hi, Sarge. I'm just about to jump over to the keto channel. So I'm going to try and do 2 walks. So we've nearly done 1 full circle. So I want to try and do another full circle in a minute. Just a couple more minutes. I'm trying to breathe some life back into Elvis Presley long lost footage and into Elvis Presley fan on keto. So my plan here on Elvis Presley long lost footage is to start finding some more old footage, old pictures, some old write-ups, just some old history. I want to cover the history of Elvis from Tupelo to the day he died. I don't want to use too many video clips because I get told off. So I am going to be getting on here, doing some old footage and some dog walks. Same goes for Elvis Presley fan on keto. I'm going to get on there, but obviously on the keto channel, I want to discuss the keto diet as well, which we will be in a couple of minutes. So guys, I'm going to jump over now and I'll see you on Elvis Presley fan on keto. And we will be doing regular live streams on the keto channel and on Elvis Presley long lost footage. And then we're going to keep the video footage will be on the Defending Elvis, fans want the truth, Defending Elvis with a forgiving heart. So that's my plan, yeah? I'm still going to do my usual videos on Defending Elvis, that's not going to change. But the live streams are going to be more on the keto channel and the long lost footage channel. So please subscribe to both, guys. I'll see you in a second. I'm going to switch over. Ella, we're going to switch over while she has a wee. Look at her. Yeah, she's having a wee. Good timing, Ella. I'll see you in 1 minute.